I could really go for some tootsie-frootsie ice cream right about now. And speaking of tootsie-frootsie ice cream, my number 4 Marx Brothers pick from 1937, A Day at the Races. The follow-up to A Night at the Opera, and just barely edging it out to reach the number 4 spot, A Night at the Opera and A Day at the Races both feature Alan Jones as the juvenile male lead, and of course he gets a chance to sing in both films. Not quite as much in this one as Night at the Opera, but still a little bit of singing going on, including a problematic scene where the Marx Brothers briefly don blackface. We've seen the sort of racial commentaries in Duck Soup and The Big Store, but nothing you couldn't play today for a whole family or whatever, but the blackface in this is definitely a little bit uncomfortable, which is a shame because it follows up a great dance number, and it kind of, I think, undercuts that a little bit. But I think A Day at the Races deserves to be this high on the list because it has so many great individual scenes. I already mentioned the tootsie-frootsie ice cream routine, which is one of the best ones the group ever committed to film. There's also the very funny, "Here's your Florida call, Mr. Whitmore," scene as well, involving Groucho kind of playing multiple voices on the phone, which is a pretty good bit. On the back, you see Groucho with Esther Muir, who pops up briefly as kind of like a comic femme fatale. There's a very funny scene with her, which even includes Chico playing O'Reilly the house detective, so we get to hear an Irish-Italian accent combo. Pretty impressive stuff there. Maureen O'Sullivan plays the female juvenile lead. She does a pretty good job. She has good chemistry with the brothers, and she gets to play a character that is kind of fiery and says what's on her mind, as opposed to some of the personality-less female leads we see in other films of theirs. We also have Douglas Dumbrill popping up very briefly as Mr. Morgan, one of the film's villains. He would later play a bigger role in The Big Store, and he's very good in that. He's good here too. They don't give him quite as much to do. Sig Rumon also plays a fun role. He was in A Night at the Opera and would later appear in Night at Casablanca as an antagonistic doctor. For those of you who don't know, of course, Groucho plays a horse doctor who's hired by a struggling hospital to turn their finances around and so on. So he gets a lot of great bits, and he has a few great scenes actually where he kind of banters with Margaret Dumont, who is madly in love with him, and as a hypochondriac doesn't realize that Groucho is actually a horse doctor. He just gives her, you know, what she wants to hear in order to keep collecting payment from her, that kind of thing. So it's pretty good, some good routines there. And a very fun horse race finale too, which is both exciting and has some great comedy bits in it there. Frankie Darro playing the crooked jockey. He'd pop up in all sorts of things, from Wild Boys of the Road to doing voiceover work in Pinocchio. So great to see him there. All in all, very fun film. Yeah, there are a couple kind of tedious moments there too. There's a big ballet number that slows the film down. I will say though, the ballerinas are very impressive dancers, so it's not quite maybe as draggy as something like the opera scenes in Night at the Opera, that sort of thing. And yeah, the blackface is kind of problematic, but overall, a great instance where the Marx Brothers are able to blend both story and comedy to make an effective film. One that I'm desperately trying to get into the National Film Registry, but so far no luck. But a lot of fun, and one that I absolutely recommend. A Day at the Races. Just remember one thing. Whatever it is, I'm against it. Number 3 on my list, we have Horse Feathers from 1932. Horse Feathers, of course, being their famous football movie. So Groucho takes over as president of struggling Huxley College and spends more time trying to fix the big Thanksgiving Day football game than he does actually trying to educate the student body. But no worries there, because his son, played by his youngest brother Zeppo, and the other brothers who work their way into the plot don't really need much in terms of education on student bodies, if you know what I'm saying. Horse Feathers is a great film. It has some amazing musical moments, including each brother doing his rendition of Everyone Says I Love You, which is one of the biggest highlights of the Marx Brothers' musical career. If you love slapstick, you'll love the big football finale. You know, I don't know that football fans are going to think very highly of it. It's not maybe as realistic or as maybe appropriate as something like Harold Lloyd's The Freshman or The Three Stooges' Three Little Pigskins. It definitely leans more into the surrealist territory, as a lot of their later Paramount films did. And we'll get to Duck Soup here before too long. But at the end of the day, it is definitely worth it to see some slapstick and Groucho, or Harpo rather, putting mustard on Nat Pendleton's finger and biting it like a hot dog and so on. Pretty much worth seeing there. Thelma Todd is the female lead for the group. She does an amazing job. She has great chemistry with the Marxes. Of course, at the time, she was one of the top comedians in Hollywood. You know, she'd done movies with Jimmy Durante and with Wheeler and Woolsey. So the Marx Brothers, this is actually her second film with them. She's definitely the girl for the job. David Landau pops up as the villain. He really isn't given a lot to do, which is a shame because he and Groucho have really good chemistry. And that's a lot of fun as well. David Landau, of course, made his career playing cantankerous bosses and abusive fathers and things like that in films of the 30s. So he fits in pretty well as the big-time gambler villain. All in all, a lot of fun bits. I think the one thing that actually keeps Horse Feathers out of the top two, or number one position for me, is that Horse Feathers has never been restored. You might remember when we talked about Animal Crackers, I noted that this Blu-ray release that allowed us for the first time to see the original Animal Crackers fully restored with all the missing scenes that were cut for censorship put back in, plus the movie looked amazing. They'd done a lot of cleanup work on it. Horse Feathers does not have that level of restoration. It's very obvious there are a lot of scenes still missing, particularly those involving Groucho, Harpo, and Chico coming into Thelma Todd's apartment and, of course, throwing Zeppo out and whatnot. And there's a lot of really bad cuts there. You can tell a lot of material was removed. There are jokes about blocks of ice and be a lamp in the window for a wandering boy and so on, but we don't really get either the build-up or all of the punchline to those, so it's a little bit disconcerting. And I think if Horse Feathers was fully restored, I might be able to appreciate it just a little bit more and bump it up to the top two. But as it stands, a must-watch for Marx Brothers fans. A lot of fun scenes. Yeah, pretty loose and pretty unbelievable in terms of plot, but definitely a movie that you can have a lot of fun with. If you're ever traveling internationally and are unable to pass through customs, I guess you could always try to impersonate Maurice Chevalier. All you have to do is sing one of his songs. If a nightingale could sing like you. And that, of course, is a reference to their 1931 film and my number 2 pick, Monkey Business. Monkey Business was only the brothers' third movie, and the first one not based on a stage production, and they take full advantage of that. The brothers trapped on an ocean liner, crossing the Atlantic back to the US, and get involved in gang war, amongst other things, particularly with the pretty girlfriend, played by Thelma Todd, of a big shot gangster out to sort of build up his own power by taking over from a competitor who was retiring. That may sound like an intricate plot, but believe me, it's not. In fact, the plot is often pushed to the side in favor of extensive gags and routines, some of which are very funny, involving the Marx Brothers, from them stowing away in the cargo hold by hiding in 4 identical barrels and harmonizing to Sweet Adeline, often cited as maybe the only time we hear Harpo Marx's voice in a Marx Brothers film. There is debate on that, though. 2 scenes of Groucho and Chico sneaking into the captain's quarters and eating his lunch while giving him a lecture about how the stockholder of today is the stowaway of tomorrow. To them sneaking through customs by pretending to be Maurice Chevalier, which leads to a very good musical bit, and one that each of the brothers gets a chance to participate in, kind of prefiguring Everyone Says I Love You from Horse Feathers. And of course there's a big finale involving a slapstick fist fight and the brothers crashing a society party and so on. It leads to some very good gags there. Groucho showing up at a costume party, and when a husband dressed as a Native American threatens him, he rips the toupee off of another patron and tells them to hide their scalp. The Indians are coming, and so on. So definitely some good scenes there. Thelma Todd has great chemistry with the brothers. She plays mostly opposite Groucho in this, which is a wise choice, and they have some very good scenes. And at the end of the day, Monkey Business kind of speaks for itself, I think. A great testament to everything that the brothers were capable of. It has the length of some of their more prestigious films, combined with the anarchy and the surrealism of some of their shorter films like Horse Feathers and Duck Soup. Yeah, the musical bits might drag a little bit. There's nothing too egregious here, but for example, the piano and harp solos are kind of pushed together. Some fans don't like that. And of course, if you're looking for a more intricate plot, this isn't the film for you. Despite being longer than some of their more plotless affairs, doesn't necessarily have a major story that it tells. If you'd asked me as a teenager, I would have put Monkey Business at number 1. Indeed, for a time as a boy, it was one of my favorite movies and one of my most watched movies of all time, I'd say. But I think there's one film that just barely edges it out for number 1. Before we talk about my number 1 pick, though, there's one Marx Brothers film that I can't quite judge, and it ties in with this one, actually. The Marx Brothers did a segment, the Maurice Chevalier joke, actually, but done slightly different as a theatrical agency sketch, in a movie called The House That Shadows Built, which was a kind of a retrospective on the history of Paramount Pictures up through that time. The whole film, as far as I know, has never been made available. It features clips from several silent films and early sound films and talks about some of Paramount's upcoming productions, some of which never actually got produced. The Marx Brothers segment, however, has been preserved and it's available on most releases of their Paramount-era films. But sadly, I couldn't include The House That Shadows Built as I don't have it in its entirety. I don't think it's ever been released in its entirety, so we can't count that. But do know that's kind of an interesting footnote that is kind of tangentially connected to this film. Now, on to that number 1. Hail, hail Fredonia, land of the free and brave. Brings us to number 1, my top Marx Brothers film. Yeah, it's a pretty predictable answer. From 1933, Duck Soup. Oftentimes people ask, what are some good black and white movies, older movies that can get maybe kids into older films or people who aren't familiar with them? What are some good kind of starting points? And one movie I consistently recommend is Duck Soup. At about an hour long, Duck Soup is quick, it's fast-paced, it's a lot of fun. It has some of the best moments of both comedy and music, not just of Marx Brothers films, but of any 1930s films, or maybe any films across the board. Not a second is wasted in Duck Soup. Groucho, of course, is the opportunistic Rufus T. Firefly, who manages to finagle his way into the leadership of the small country of Fredonia. Of course, the country's on the brink of war with its neighbor, particularly its neighbor's snotty ambassador Trentino, played by Lewis Calhern, pop up in all sorts of great films, and here as the villain is absolutely hilarious. And yeah, throughout the movie we have some great, not just commentaries on war and politics and the use that politicians and other leaders have for our money, but we also have some great songs. Surprisingly, no big Harpo piano solos, but we get the Fredonia's Going to War number, which is very impressive, and I think almost has to be seen to be believed. We also get Groucho's very fun song, very similar to I'm Against It from Horse Feathers. Last man nearly ruined this place, he didn't know what to do with it, but you think this country's bad off now? Just wait till I get through with it. So, a lot of fun there too. Duck Soup, of course, the last Marx Brothers film to feature Zeppo. Zeppo doesn't do a ton in this either. Again, he tends to be overlooked, but he does have some fun scenes, especially near the end as the brothers are trapped in a bunker with enemy forces rapidly approaching. Duck Soup was not a major success on release and maybe was a little too cynical for Depression-era audiences who maybe wanted something a little lighter. But today, I think Duck Soup has aged extremely well and remains probably one of the best political satires ever made. And I would easily say it was my favorite Marx Brothers film, and a movie I think everybody should see at least once, preferably more times, as it's truly a classic of American cinema. So please comment your favorite Marx Brothers films below, or where you would put films in a ranking, and I'll see you next time for some more videos. Thanks for watching.